Can you stop doing that? If I did this, it could work. Hello folks, hope you like this new setup. I've been trying to figure out the best places to like set up the camera. I still haven't figured it out. There's like no good sweet spot yet, and the glasses, the glare is just gonna be really bad today. I don't know what else to do, so I'm so sorry. This is Isis, and this is Isis's hi. Hope you had a good week. To kind of give some update and clarifications from my last video, I talked about the National Popular Vote Interstate Impact Compact, and to give a little bit more background, this is from their website, which I'll link down below, but the National Popular Vote Compact is actually a bill that states can enact. Of course, that has to go through kind of the state's lawmaking body, so the state kind of Congress, and the bill just promises that those electoral votes will go towards the presidential candidate that wins popular vote, and that includes the 50 states and the District of Columbia. This bill has been around for 14 years, so it's been around since 2006, and has been enacted by 15 states and DC. I believe I said that was like 196 electoral votes needed of the 270. So this includes 4 small states, 8 medium-sized states, and 3 big states. And I have also left a link down below to see if you want to see your state's status. Some of their kind of basis or argument is based off of the Constitution, which is really funny because the opposing side also bases it off kind of the Constitution and kind of what the founders had framed. But anyways, they use their basis for some of this off of the Constitution, and they talk about how some state election laws are just as kind of do the same thing, which is a winner-take-all law. That's basically explained in, I believe, the first link down below. It goes into a little bit more detail. I'm not going to go crazy into it right now because I don't want a good portion of this video to be surrounding the Electoral College when we had kind of already talked about it. So some reasons about how it can be challenged in court is that, ironically, the arguments against the bill are also around what the founders actually wanted. And another argument would be that it would force candidates to have a more broad political vision, which I can see how that can go bad, but I can also see how if you are going to be a president, it's supposed to be a president for everyone, a president of the people. So you would kind of want a little bit of a broad political vision, but I do understand that if you do that, it might not always lead to the best things. So, I mean, I get it, but I also am like, well, the president's supposed to serve everyone, not just like a particular set of people. Take that as you wish. So the Brookings Institute, which I love a lot of the research that they do, also wrote an article about the Electoral College that I'll link down below because they do a really good job of explaining it. So that's all I'm going to say. And again, I will always encourage people to do their own research. I can have different contexts on this research. I might not have other sources that I could have used, and if more than 7 people are watching this, I encourage you to put down some comments down below just about kind of what you think. Let's get into the actual video. I want to talk about what it means to defund the police. There's a panel that I was listening to. Somebody had asked them to talk about defunding the police, and while they were talking, I realized that I don't think a lot of people understand what defunding the police completely means. A lot of opinions that aren't completely formulated, not just them, but a lot of opinions that are formulated, and I don't think there's a lot of proper research when it's being talked about. From the research that I've kind of been able to do, I already kind of had a good understanding about what defunding the police means. I think there's points that actually support the community and that actually support the police, so I'm gonna get into that. I want to say just kind of overall as a blank summary statement, defunding the police literally means taking away some funding from law enforcement over a period of time, not abruptly, and putting it back into a lot of other community services that'll actually help a lot of the people within those communities, particularly poor communities. So police departments notoriously have huge budgets, and we'll get into how much that is, and over time the police budget has gotten bigger and the money going to those community service programs has gotten smaller. There needs to kind of be a rebuilding, a redefining of what law enforcement and policing is supposed to be doing. We'll always need police officers, unfortunately, because not everybody is always the greatest. There are things that happen, there are violent crimes that occur. So what does it mean to defund the police? So one of my favorite research websites, again, the Brookings Institute, defined what it means to defund the police. It means to reallocate or redirect funds away from the police department to other government agencies that are funded by the local municipality. It does not mean abolishing policing. Even those who want to completely abolish policing don't really mean to abolish the system completely. They would rather it be rebuilt. So the reason why it's focused on kind of local government is because a lot of the spending occurs at a municipal level. This means is that if there is an effort to defund it, it has to start there and not really at the state level. A lot of the time, budgets dedicate a huge portion to law enforcement and a small portion to community resources. The 2017 report by the Center for Popular Democracy, the Law for Black Lives, and the Black Youth Project 100 examined the budgets of 12 major U.S. cities and counties over the last 3 decades. Funding dedicated to incarceration, corrections, and policing has come at the expense of infrastructure spending, mental health services, housing subsidies, youth programs, food benefits programs, and other services. Black majority cities such as Atlanta, Baltimore, Detroit, and Oakland exceeded the average for police funding, and most of the 12 budgets allocated more than a quarter of general funds to policing. Of the cities and counties profiled, Oakland gives police the largest, which is 41%. Each year, state and local governments spend upward of $100 billion on law enforcement, and that's excluding billions more in federal grants and resources. These budgets usually don't reflect the priorities of Black taxpayers and communities that have higher unemployment rates, underfunded schools, fewer merit scholarships, and less access to quality health care. State and local government expenditures toward policing amount to $115 billion each year, and another $79 billion on incarceration, for a total of $194 billion. Compare that to the $181 billion spent on highways and roads, $100 billion spent on public health, $75 billion on mass transit and rail, $52 billion on housing and community development efforts, and $40 billion on state mental health services. So we're gonna get into some main arguments for defunding the police outside of what I just said. I tried to section this off well, but it didn't work because a lot of the reasoning kind of feeds into each other. So hopefully this makes sense. I promise I'm not naked. I have a shirt. You can't see it. Rashawn Ray writes that one of the main arguments are calls for service. Data shows that 9 out of 10 calls for service are non-violent. While these incidents can turn violent, police can contribute to the escalation of violent force. Police officer training and skill set are often not in sync with the social interactions they have with civilians. They are mostly trained in use of force tactics and worst-case scenarios to reduce potential threats. Over time, police and corrections officers have taken on a number of responsibilities, from monitoring schools and campuses to responding to mental health crises in which officers have neither training nor expertise. There are counselors and programs for victims of sexual assault, services for people experiencing homelessness or suffering from addictions, and departments which respond to domestic abuse. But these programs, as said previously, are not adequately funded and have constantly been defunded over the years. Reducing prison and police department budgets means allowing these services to alleviate the burden placed on police and prisons. Restructuring police responsibilities would also open up jobs that don't lessen the financial mobility of residents. According to a 2016 report from the Brennan Center for Justice, 39% of prisoners should be in treatment, community service, or probation rather than incarcerated, because they are non-violent, low-level offenders, or have already served long sentences. This amounts to nearly 600,000 inmates. To release them would free up $20 billion per year, and that would be enough to employ 327,000 teachers. Insane. Insane. When I read that, insane. A huge issue for these other calls for service is that they require documentation, which is fine, but when cops are called to do incredibly minor tasks, it leads them to being overstressed and overworked and redirects their attention away from solving violent crime. Breonna Taylor's report was blank, particularly when it listed her injuries. Police checked no next to the box that says forced entry, even though witnesses and crime scene photos obviously show that the officers used a battering ram to force entry into the apartment while Taylor was asleep. "They're asking us to do too much," said former Dallas Police Chief David Brown in a 2016 interview. "Every societal failure, we put it off for the cops to solve. That's too much to ask. Policing was never meant to solve all those problems." In 2015, the Washington Post found that 1 in 4 people killed by a police officer suffered from a serious mental illness at the time of their death. So one kind of aside, my criminal justice professor always used to joke about the fact that she married a cop, and she always found that ironic because she didn't really like cops. But she talks a lot about how the way that police officers get their shifts, sometimes they'll get like a day shift or a night shift, and they'll have it for a long enough period of time that they actually start to get used to it. But as soon as they start to get used to it is when their shifts actually are changed. So not only, do your shifts change before you can fully get accustomed to it, you are going into these communities with training that doesn't really match up with the social interactions that you have with a lot of civilians. And, you see a lot of crazy things on the job. And so a lot of these things kind of lead to a lot of mental health issues in police officers. And that can lead to intimate partner violence, which I can't find the research, but is there if you look it up. It leads to a lot of intimate partner violence and alcoholism. My second point, this comes with a trigger warning. A lot of the ones going down definitely now require a lot of trigger warnings. So I just want to kind of put that out there. Police officers aren't always successful at solving violent crime. In another research article, there's an argument that the failure to prosecute cops who murder typifies a bad overall track record with solving violent crime. So approximately 38% of murders, 66% of rapes, 70% of robberies, and 47% of aggravated assaults go unsolved every year. Police stops leading to charges and convictions are also low. NYPD's famous stop and frisk found that over 90% of people stopped by police were not committing any crime and didn't have any contraband or weapons on them. And as we know, the stop and frisk program targeted a lot of Black and brown people the most, with physical force being used 50% of the time. Police were also more successful at identifying criminality for white folks versus Black folks. A lot of this is due in the difference of how they analyze the civilians. So with white folks, they look at their behavior. With Black and brown folks, a lot of the time, it's implicit bias, because a lot of the time, police officers are white. So if they're analyzing a lot of usually white civilians, it's based off of their behavior. But if they're analyzing a lot of Black and brown folks, it's usually off of skin tone. Those in favor of defunding point out that police departments across the country consistently have low rates of solving crimes, even as their budgets have increased threefold in the past 40 years. Across the country, rape cases result in a notoriously low number of charges. In 2017, police closed just 32% of rape cases, and hundreds of thousands of rape kits have sat untested in police storage for years. According to an FBI database, about 30% of robberies and less than 15% of burglaries and motor vehicle thefts result in arrests. When police investigate a crime involving a Black victim, evidence shows that the clearance rate drops significantly. A 2014 New York Daily News investigation found that solved about 86% of homicides when the victim was white, but when the victim was Black, the clearance rate dropped to 45%. Third point, police reform doesn't work. Again, this is another trigger warning. Though many politicians argue for reforming police departments, using common sense solutions like installing civilian review boards and banning warrior-style training, advocates argue that incremental reform has failed to combat police violence in any meaningful way. After a white officer shot and killed Michael Brown in Ferguson in 2014, for instance, there was a nationwide push for officers to wear body cameras, which advocates predicted would improve police accountability.